Good morning, everybody. Oh, that's kind of loud. Um, Good morning, everyone. Yeah, welcome to the Navigating Life as an Unaffected Female Caregiver panel. Um, we have this wonderful group of panelists. I'm going to let them introduce themselves more and tell you their story. But Kim McPeek is at the end, and Emily Jones, and the award-winning Emily Jones. Sorry, I and Julie LeBoeuf. And so they're going to each introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about their story. I'm Suzanne Perkins. I am also an unaffected female caregiver. My daughter is 21 and was diagnosed when she was 16 with DM1. So that's a little bit about me. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Julia.
It's an honor and it's a privilege to be here with you guys today. I strongly believe that it's in sharing our stories that we become stronger, and it allows us to learn and grow. I am sure that everybody here has a very important story to share, and every one of our stories are unique and they're important ones. And I hope that some of what I have to share with you today will resonate with you in some way or another. We were told to talk about ourselves today, something that doesn't come easy to me. I'm used to telling the story of my children and my husband, but when they said, no, you have to focus on yourself, that's a bit difficult. And I think that is something we may all have in common. So here I go. This is my story. So I grew up on a farm in a small rural town in Northern Ontario, Canada. I was the oldest of 4 siblings. I've always had that nurturing, caregiving personality from a very young age. I tend to give to others, and I can easily forget about myself. From an early age, however, I knew that education was important to me. We didn't grow up without, we had a lot of love in our family, but financially times were hard. And pursuing my education and having a career someday was always very important to me. So at one point I said, I'm never getting married. I don't want children. I'm just going to pursue my career and go on from there. However, I fell in love and I've been married to this man for the last 25 years. We have 3 children. Alexandra is our oldest. She's 21. Gabrielle is 19 and Nicholas is 16. In our relationship, I tend to be the one who plans, I organize, I remember things, I remind. I'm sure that sounds familiar. He, on the other hand, he listens more than he talks. He enjoys quiet times and his alone time. He is more laid back, carefree, and he pushes me to stop worrying and helps me overcome my fears. I think it works because we are so different. We don't always see eye to eye, even if at times I can get frustrated and scared by the changes that are taking place. He is still my rock, my soft place to fall, and I can't imagine a world without him. I'm going to read a little bit more because when it's emotional, I have a hard time speaking. My husband was diagnosed with myotonic dystrophy type 1 in 2012. He was in his late 30s. Our oldest daughter, Alexandra, and her son, Nicholas, have the juvenile onset of this disease. I will take a proud moment and share with you that Alexandra was the Kayla Vidic Award last year for designing. Would you hold this up for me, please? The logo that you see for the International Awareness Day taking place on September 15th. As a caregiver, I spent a lot of time being the cheerleader. I push them to fight. I remain optimistic, and we live for today. And on some days, in the face of adversity, I'm not sure what's holding everything together. I didn't know I was choosing this disease when I said I do. But in the same vows, I also said, for better or for worse, and in sickness and in health. So I choose to stay and I fight every day. And an important part is not to lose myself in all of this. And for me, that was my career that I spoke about a while ago. So I'd like to focus a little bit more on how I manage my personal life and my career and all of this. So I'm a special education consultant for a school district, and I have been teaching for the last 25 years. I feel very passionate about the work I do, and I feel privileged because my career allows me to advocate for my own children as I'm advocating for other families. I'm lucky to have two very important role models in my life that shaped who I am today. In the 1950s, my paternal grandmother gave birth to a son with a severe global disability. From that day on, she became a devoted and loving caregiver. I grew up with my uncle in my life because of my grandmother, who chose to love, care, and accept him as he was. So this is where I got the idea of inclusion. During the same time period, my maternal grandmother was hiding her pregnancy in order to keep and further her career in education. She was a pioneer who fought for women's rights in the workplace. She was the founder of the special education program in our district. She believed every child has the right to belong in an education system. So I see myself in both my grandmothers. I feel that both their stories are equally important. And my hope as a caregiver is that we all get to make our decision. If we want to stay at home and be a stay-at-home mom to give and to care for our children, that is okay. And if we choose to have a career, there's also a place for that. It is a personal decision that we have to make for ourselves and that nobody else should make for us. Raising children with special needs and being a working mom can quickly take a toll, as you all know. Many times throughout my career, I have questioned my priorities. This debate has weighed heavily on me. When it comes to finding the work-life balance, I often bring myself to think of the analogy of juggling glass and rubber balls. If you drop a rubber ball, somebody will catch it. If you drop that crystal ball, that glass ball, and it breaks, there's nobody else that can come along and fix it for you. So for me, my family's health, that is an important glass ball. Work is secondary. So I try to remind myself to take time for what is truly important and not to be afraid to say no. By saying no to work, it means I'm saying yes to something more important. And saying yes to something more important has become saying yes to myself lately. As caregivers, we tend to forget this a lot. On my last birthday, I made a resolution to myself. I want to inch my way towards my next decade by taking better care of myself. I see it as a journey and not an overnight change. My goal is to better myself in a gentle and compassionate way, accepting that I will make mistakes along the way, knowing that you can't pour from an empty cup. At the time, I wasn't sure how I was going to find the energy and time to do this. I wasn't sure about the steps I would take to get there. So I started off with my diet, eating the food, because as we know, our loved ones, we also have to make sure that they're eating properly. So for me, that was just in the meal planning, that was simple. I'm just going to focus on food. And to my surprise, the family got involved and we started planning and eating more nutritious meals together. So the next step is I was struggling a lot with muscle pain and headaches and migraines, and I probably from the stress, the daily stress and struggles. So I moved on to focus more on the mindful movement. Okay, what can I add to my daily life? My day is busy. What is realistic for me? So walking outside is something we all enjoy in our family. It gets the kids moving. It gets my husband moving. And I noticed that just walking down that country road, listening and being mindful of what is surrounding me and the ground beneath my feet and the birds and the trees. And I found that as we walked, my mind would just drift and my focus would be off this disease and I would just be in the moment. I also started doing yoga to improve my flexibility, my mobility. And to my surprise, I've noticed that my quality of sleep is better. I have more energy, less body aches, less headaches. And through my yoga practice, I also started to learn more about the importance of being connected to my mind and spirit. Wanting to nourish my mind and soul, I started reading and exploring more about emotions. When the kids and my husband were first diagnosed, I was very much into that staying hopeful and being optimistic and kind of pushing down any kind of other emotion that would come up: fear, guilt, frustration. And I've read a book. I've been reading a book about emotions, Atlas to the Heart. And I came to realize that you have to take the time to acknowledge all emotions. Yes, being hopeful is important. Being optimistic is important. But those emotions that I'm pushing down don't go away. They are there. They will surface. So it's learning how to live and how to deal with those emotions. And I've learned that emotions are like a wave. Let the emotion come, observe it, feel it. Don't try to fix it. Don't try to justify it. And like a wave, it will kind of just draw back and you will find your calm again. I'm also learning to rekindle with my inner child, all those pastimes and interests that, we tend to not focus on. We're so busy in the day-to-day living, taking care of our loved ones, that I've forgotten, what do I like to do? I like gardening. I like watching the birds come to the feeders. So I'm taking time to nourish that. So once again, to my surprise, these activities don't take time away from my day. On the contrary, it creates moments where I'm more present and peaceful, and I'm more present for my family. So my wellness journey is not going to take away the reality of my struggle, but taking care of myself has helped me change how I perceive that reality and what I make of it, how I relate to it. And there lies our real power. So to conclude, 19 years ago, my husband, Michelle, and I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro to raise awareness for ALS because my mother was battling this disease at the time. The journey to the top had a lot to teach me. At the time, I thought this battle, watching my mother battle this disease, was going to be my mountain. What I didn't realize at the time was that I was going to have another mountain to climb with my husband and my children. And like this disease, this mountain may seem too tall and hard to conquer at times, but it had special lessons to teach me. And I hope some of the messages and some of those lessons that I've learned, I will share with you, and hopefully they'll resonate with you in some way or another. So I've learned from this that so when times get hard, I remind myself to take it one step at a time. Don't hesitate to take that hand that reaches out to help. We are caregivers, but we also need a caregiver. We need that special someone to lean on. Finally, take a deep breath and don't forget to take in the beauty that surrounds you and the people around you, this community. Because most importantly, life is meant to be a journey, not a destination. So take care, my friends. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name's Kim. My husband, Tom, and multiple members of his family are impacted by myotonic dystrophy type 2. I've been a social worker for more years than I care to share with anybody, but the last 10 or so of those have been as a medical social worker in rehab and long-term care, and now as a hospice social worker. Tom and I met in college. and got married pretty shortly after that, and thought we had kind of your typical life planned out. So overall, we feel we're pretty fortunate. Some days don't really feel that way. But one of the things that I've learned is that the constant for us is going to be change. As we were learning that Tom was likely affected by this crazy disease, we were quite a bit younger than today and very active. We trained dogs and hunted together, didn't think twice about jumping in the car for a last minute road trip, anything from 2 to 10 hours, it just didn't matter. We drove close to 4 hours almost every summer weekend to go camping. And when we were there, we were at the pool playing sand volleyball, sitting up around the campfire till all hours with our friends. A couple times a summer, we would grill ribs and fire roast sweet corn for 50 of the camp regulars. Looking back today, just thinking about that makes me really tired. So there've been a lot of changes and adjustments getting from there to where we are now. Some of the adjustments were big. Some of them were so small that I really don't think we even noticed them at the time. A couple of the big things, one of those was kids. As we were figuring out that something was going on, we were at an age where we needed to make a decision about whether we were actually starting a family or not. We knew very little about DM2 at that time. Most people were still calling it prom. Our choice was not to have children. The things that played into that were certainly our level of knowledge of the disease, but also the accessibility of options then for family planning, availability of the technology, and the cost. Our choice wouldn't be the best choice for everyone. If we knew everything then that we know now, our choice might have been different, but you can't go back and second guess that. Some of folks certainly don't even know that they have this disease when they're at the point where they're growing their families. And that's true for several of Tom's cousins who do have children. I guess the other huge thing for us was when Tom stopped working and applied for long-term disability coverage. I mean, heaven knows his primary care doctor, if not actively encouraging him to stop working, had at least been talking about it for quite a while before we got to that point. The issue that pushed it over the edge was a medication change. It was a reaction to the combination of meds that he was taking at the time. He recognized it pretty quickly, and he stopped taking that one new drug that had been added to the ever-growing list. So we were pretty fortunate. His reaction was caught. It was not severe, but left unaddressed, serotonin syndrome can actually be life-threatening. And that was enough for us to decide that working just wasn't that important. So that led to the application process for Social Security disability income. Very stressful. Because his employer had a long-term disability policy, they actually provided an attorney to assist us after those first denials, because it's in their best interest, because when he qualified for Social Security, they would get some of their money back that they had paid toward his income. So that ended up being a good thing for us. All in all, it probably took 1.5 years to reach the final hearing and approval. We were pretty fortunate in that we had a private disability policy in place that kicked in during that time. And I really don't know how people do it. I don't think we would have managed financially for 1.5 years without that policy in place. Now we're years down the road. In the beginning, Tom's Uncle Bob was a great resource for us over time because he had been diagnosed earlier. He was really the one who led us to the resources that we use today. It all started with the Yahoo group. So it was an old listserv group, very outdated technology at this point. But we found the community and we started learning more and becoming more involved. So from that Yahoo group, we went to our first conference 11 years ago. And we met a bunch of the people from the Yahoo group. There was, all kinds of messages back and forth. Who's going to be there? What's it going to be like? And we all found each other in the lobby. We took over entirely half of the lobby, drug every piece of furniture we could lay our hands on over into a huge circle, and started sharing our stories and struggles. And I can't begin to tell you the impact that first conversation of talking to folks like us had. It was just nice to know not only that we weren't alone, but just as importantly, that we weren't crazy. Other people were going through some of the same things. So at some point in all of these things, Tom did get a genetic diagnosis. We continued to attend conferences, gathering as much information as we could, either from the MDF or online resources, anything we could find. Tom joined the registry. He's participated in some studies. He's been ruled out of others that he expressed interest in. He's been facilitating the DM2 virtual support group and moderating the DM2 Facebook page for some time, and fairly recently joined the board of directors for the MDF. I'm now facilitating the DM2 Caregivers virtual support group. And of course, we were just ecstatic to be able to come back in person for a conference because this is family, right? We all know that we learn as we go. You know, there's no dress rehearsal for life. Just jump in, get messy, it's going to happen. We also know that there are some tips that are true for all caregivers, such as not skimping on self-care, building yourself a good support network, both medical for those needs, but also your personal network for your own sanity. Then you cook them off, eat right, get enough sleep, don't overextend yourself physically and get hurt while you're providing care. Injured caregivers are something none of us need to have to deal with on top of everything else. We all know this and a lot of other things on many levels, but we may not always be very good at following them. And that's okay. We're always a work in progress. So as far as DM2 specific, it's just such a variable disease for individuals that caregiving experiences are incredibly diverse. I've met caregivers who deal with significant physical needs and the struggles that come with hands-on care. I've also met caregivers who really need to do very little to provide physical assistance with day-to-day tasks, but need to take over more responsibilities related to cognitive dysfunction, and folks who have to do both. I guess my best advice on this front is to stay observant. We don't always notice those small changes because we're way too close to what's going on. It feels like some of those things just sneak up. All of a sudden you open your eyes one day and it's like, when did that happen? But when you have the time to take a calm look back, all of a sudden you're starting to see those little things you missed along the way. The MDF is a great resource. Support groups are a great resource. They've expanded the available support groups, lots more locations, physical groups, lots of virtual options. You don't even have to leave the house if you're interested. You just pop in your pajamas if you want, and see what you think. I think that all those groups are pretty similar and that there's not a lot of push or pressure to feel like you have to share. You can be there and observe and just kind of see what you think. The other thing is use the adaptive things that are available to make life easier. I've talked to lots of folks who are DM2 caregivers who get an extreme amount of pushback. I'm not using a cane. I don't need a walker. Don't you dare get me a wheelchair. All of those things. But you know, that handicap placard on the car, so you park up close. Doesn't seem like a big deal unless you just had to walk a quarter mile to get to the store or the theater or wherever you're going in. Now you still have the energy to walk. That mobility scooter that nobody wants is going to extend your ability to do those things that require long distances of walking or long periods of standing, which for my husband, standing is honestly worse than walking. It just makes his hips lock up. The other things are planning ahead when you can. Are you going to have a job change? Are you making a physical move to a new house? If you are looking at a career change, does your new employer meet the requirements for FMLA? Is that something you can get an application in for early so that when you need that, that's already available? Do a little research. Is the company known for supporting employees related to healthcare needs and family needs? Some folks have a really great reputation about that and others not so much. For relocating, that old 2-story farmhouse is absolutely charming now. But how difficult is it going to be to make the modifications for stairs or to get a walk-in shower for safety? Our first requirement looking for our current house was, 1-level ranch home. That's pretty logical. But there were other things we had to look at too. What about the terrain of the lot? We looked at some 1-floor log cabins that would be awesome. They were on the side of a mountain. Okay, that wasn't going to be our dream home, right? So I'm going to mention genetic testing in a few minutes, and I just want to make sure that you understand I'm talking from the perspective of DM2. Genetic testing and diagnosis and those things can be very different between DM1 and DM2 because of the differences in how it impacts health. So we know this is a genetic disease with a 50% chance of transmission. So once we know transmission's a possibility, there are people that have a burning need to know if they have it, and others who don't want anything to do with having any of that knowledge. It's a personal choice. What's right for Sally may not be right for her brother, Harry. There are lots of factors to consider, both what it means for healthcare decisions and for your personal peace of mind. I would encourage you not to rush to a diagnosis for DM2 without a plan. It's important to make sure your primary care doctor knows this individual may be affected, and here are the things that we need to monitor regularly. Concerns about general anesthesia. The MDF offers us the toolkit and those fact sheets. Those are a great resource. Provide those things. Even if you don't have a formal diagnosis, if you know your family's impacted, then those are things that you can monitor without moving forward on the other end. We do know there's not a cure, at least not yet. So that's not an issue. A lot of symptoms that come with the comorbidities associated with DM2 can be managed. DM2 really doesn't make any difference in the treatment of those at that point in time, perhaps. You have to talk with the physician, obviously, talk about symptoms as they change over time, discuss what benefits may come from a formal diagnosis, such as specific treatment options, or if it's time to apply for disability. That time before diagnosis can be used to plan for future needs. As I mentioned before, in our experience, if it was a financial lifesaver to us that there were things that were in place ahead of time, we were lucky. Having a chronic illness can impact the availability of options and costs related to those things down the road. And you can utilize a financial planner or estate attorney, someone who's familiar with those things, to help you get started on the path that's right for your individual situation. These thoughts always bring to my mind the first patient I had on my caseload as a hospice social worker who had a diagnosis of DM2. First of all, that was a little shock to the system. I got to tell you, it was a rough day at work. He was being transferred to our inpatient unit for end-of-life care. His family had just discovered he had been diagnosed with DM2 about 48 hours before he came to us. When I walked down to the room to initially meet them, there's a granddaughter in her 20s at bedside. She is on her cell phone, desperately searching for how to get genetically tested. She was very emotional about losing her grandfather. She was very scared about this mystery disease. None of them knew anything about it. She was wondering if it was going to strike her next. So maybe the granddaughter was affected, maybe she wasn't. I honestly never got to hear the end of that story because of the nature of our relationship. But what I was able to do was to pull her mom, the patient's daughter, into the hall. After standing at the copier like a mad person with my laptop up with the MDF website open, printing everything I could find and handing her this and saying, here's a great resource, little conversation about testing. Please don't make decisions right now. The middle of that crisis isn't the time to make decisions that'll have a long-term impact. So she was going to encourage her daughter to slow down. And it was Friday and it was the weekend. So I actually never got to talk to that family again, but it did make me feel fortunate to have access to this organization and those resources to pass them on. I'm just going to close by saying that I guess in some ways, everything goes back to self-care. Good planning for the future and for future needs helps reduce the burden of caregiving over time. But you can't accomplish good planning if you're just tired and stressed and can't even think straight. So remember to be kind to yourself, take care of yourself in whatever way brings you peace and rejuvenation. Cut yourself some slack on the rough days and just breathe.
Thank you.
Okay, so I retired 16 years ago. I'm sort of at the end of this journey, differently than these two women. I don't have a husband who actually was the carrier. He passed earlier this year. And I've been dealing with my son and my grandson. I brought them both up, actually. My background is that I was born in upstate New York in a little town, sort of like you actually. Played in the gardens and farmyards and went to a one-room schoolhouse. Somehow I was fortunate to get a great education, and I ended up being director of new materials research before I retired at Eastman Kodak Company, which gave me a lot of training that has allowed me to do a lot of the activities that you heard about today. Work with the people in government, do fundraising, organizational things. All those things basically are second nature due to the job I had. It seems like so long ago. But I do have and have had a great need for self-care. And I joined a group at church over 10 years ago. It's just 10 women. We meet basically every 2 weeks. We discuss some spiritual way of dealing with what's going on for each of us in the world. And each of us shares what's going on for us that day. I talk a lot about my son, my grandson, and its effect basically on their lives and my marriage. So I do have that support. And I did do yoga for many, many years. Currently, I'm not participating because I have a herniated disc. That's a whole nother story. So my son, Jason, was diagnosed in 2012. He's 50. He has an affected son, Logan, who's 17, who is the sweetest guy in the whole world, who called me earlier this week at 5 o'clock in the morning on his way to school. It was 8 o'clock there. He has no idea of the difference in time. He was very focused on a new backpack he needed, and he wanted to know whether I could get it for him when I got home. This is my life. I love this guy. Jason stopped working full time in 2012, and about 2.5 years later, we got him as Social Security disability. We got Social Security for Logan a few years later. He was tested when he was in 2014. Interestingly enough, listening to Kim, one of the things that I didn't understand was not getting genetically tested until you got life insurance in place. I did not do that for my grandson. And therefore, he has no life insurance long-term. So to protect his needs, I'll talk about that later. My son is a single dad caring for Logan. And due to very poor decisions with respect to money, his fatigue, impaired executive function, Jason's wife left the marriage in 2016. She just could not deal with what was going on in their life. And by the way, this was a good thing for all. She's very depressed. So he has joint custody and cares for Logan every other week, and also after school. For the last 10 years, he tutored at a community college, but this year he no longer can. They did not call him back to tutor, which is a real loss to him because now he's isolated socially, basically, and also that he's not really making a contribution to the world any longer. So I have to think about how we can engage him differently. He has swallowing issues now, significant dysphagia. He can't eat fruits and vegetables because that causes him to have complications with pseudo bowel obstruction. We've been in the ER, I think 4 times as a result of that. can't really walk well anymore. He kind of clumps. And we will begin having him see a palliative care doctor this October. That was a very, very hard decision for me to make with respect to his care. But I know it's important for him, not for me. Due to his continuous fatigue, he doesn't have a lot of patience with his children all the time. He's very strict. He's like black and white. As a result of this, his daughter decided, I'm going to live with mom. And that's a real big loss to him. He truly loves his daughter. She is unaffected. He loves the fact that she loves to play these complicated board games with him. He is an advocate of the most unbelievable kinds of board games you can ever have seen or try to play. And he has the capability, the intellectual capability to understand nuances like you cannot believe. But his fatigue, he usually sleeps 4 to 5 hours a day. And now he can no longer actually go up the stairs to go to bed. Now he's sleeping on the couch. Logan comes home after school, joins dad sleeping on the couch. This is not good. So we don't do much exercise. And that is another worry to me with respect to Logan, as it is to his dad. So Logan is a real advocate of Fortnite. Do any of you know Fortnite? Okay. I learn a lot about Fortnite every single day. Do you know the zero endpoint is coming and it's on this island and we've got to prevent? I have no idea. Yeah, what are we going to do about it? Okay, so and that's what he loves to talk about. I don't really give a rat's patoot, but I am going to find out about Fortnite in any way I can because it's important to him. And these board games are important to his father. He loves music. And last year, he got into something called unified bowling. This is where a person with regular skills goes with a young person with special needs skills and they go bowling. Well, they go bowling, sort of. They go up to the bowling alley and they actually play teams from other schools. But the two people that are holding the bowling balls start talking about Fortnite or Marvel movies or something. And I have to say, okay, you have to throw the ball now. Okay, they throw the ball, goes in the gutter. They don't care. They really want to sit down and talk to that person they just met from another school that has an interest similar to theirs. This is the thing that I can't figure out how to find for him. I can't find that community. I don't know how, but I'm going to find out this year. So Maya, my granddaughter's unaffected. She takes a lot of responsibility for her dad, her mom, who's depressed, and her brother. She's depressed. But we've gotten her as much care as we can. And right now, after that first horrific year as a freshman in college, where she was in a dorm room that she described as being like being in prison. She's no longer in college in that way. She's taking one course at a time. She's started her own business and she's happy. And I am thrilled for her. And I'll do anything I can do to make sure that she stays on this course. So my role as mother and grandmother is I've been very involved for 20 years with the kids. I over communicate with mom and dad and my granddaughter, take the children to all specialist appointments, my son as well as his son. We financially, Deborah and I have supported them for 10 years. We manage all the financial and healthcare needs, set up my son's 11 pills a day for the entire week. We grocery shop, we pick up prescriptions, we mow the lawn, we snow mow the driveway, with the idea of continually focusing on Jason's independence, making sure he can stay in his own home as long as he can. I'm the principal advocate for Logan's IEP. I tutor him every day after school. I went for an entire year of 10th grade online during COVID. Oh my God, I've never worked so hard in my life. I provide emotional and financial support and encouragement to Logan's 20-year-old sister, as I described. And I advocate for research funding and enroll Jason in the research trials and get him to as many research trials as I can. We are so fortunate to have Rochester. So many of you are saying, so what? I do all that. Well, I'm 75 years old. And during the last 3 months with this goofy herniated disc, there's a lot of things I can't do anymore. Who knew this would happen? I didn't. I'm the kind of person that lives in a 20-year-old mind in a 70-year-old body. So we did these things in case I pass away or both Deborah and I pass away. We've secured managed long-term care for Jason. He has, they have committed 15 hours a week of care for him that we can get a home health care aid if needed. This is critical. We've identified a trusted individual now who will come in and do a few hours a week in the house, doing the cleaning and taking care of the bathrooms. And the bathrooms, by the way, are horrific due to the disease. So we haven't set a schedule up yet, but that's coming. We've obtained a lawn service, so I don't have to do that anymore at my son's home, which is a big lawn. Deborah said she's still going to do the snow blowing in the winter, so we'll see. Driving him to appointments and research trials, acting as his advocate at every appointment remains my priority. Until my demise, it will be my priority. And those who will take on this role will either be my wife or my granddaughter. We don't know, but we're working through those conversations all the time. Keeping my son in his home, as I said, is my highest priority. What we do with him when he can no longer get to his bedroom, as I shared. Well, we decided we were going to modify the first floor of the house. We were going to put in an ADA approved bathroom. We're going to knock out a garage. And then I hired an architect, and the architect said, there's a simple fix. You can put in a chairlift to the second floor. Do you know, who knew? I didn't. You can put in a chairlift, and it has a remote control. So if it's on the second floor, you can bring it down to the first floor. And if it's on the first floor, that's right. Lorraine's right. There's 2 controls. This saved probably $50,000 to $75,000 worth of work in the house. I was like dumbfounded. Stuff on it that you can't carry any longer on that. Thanks, Lorraine. I love her. Wow, that'll save my back. Thanks. I didn't think about that. I know, call Lorraine. She's a certified registered nurse who's done it all. So we've gotten that approval. It probably takes, I don't know, something like 3 to 4 months to get put in, but it's coming. The next thing I have to do is level the floors though on that first floor. We got little bumps and he's clomping. So that's gotta take place. Originally, this is another important thing. This speaks to something Kim talked about, assets. If my son still co-owned the house with me, he would have a significant asset, which would affect his Social Security disability. So 3 years ago, after talking to an attorney, the attorney advised Deborah and I to buy the home from Jason, legally transfer it to our name, so he no longer had any assets. Having no assets, we then, if he needs to go in a nursing home, it's easy to transfer him with Medicare, Medicaid to a nursing home. And he still has the access to his SSDI for other needs. So that was a very critical step. Transferring that home early before he becomes so incapacitated is also critical, because Social Security disability has a look back. I don't know how long it is anymore. It was 3 years, and now it might be 5 years. I don't really know, but it's important to maintain the support that you need to take care of your loved one. Upon my death or both of our deaths, we've set up a special needs trust that will take care of all of Jason's needs. That special needs trust, upon Jason's death, transfers to his son, Logan. These are also very critical pieces that have to get in place. You spend a lot of time with attorneys. They know a lot, they understand the system. The big thing for me was, yes, if he's in a special needs trust, who's gonna actually make those decisions? And it turns out to be some kind of a bank who doesn't know him. And so we have now found a new trustee that we actually know. Now I need a care manager for Logan. And that's my next step. But my biggest goal is always to minimize what is in their way, to take care of what they need to be just okay in this world. So this conference helped me with the managed long-term care, the special needs trusts, managing the assets, finding the resources, getting in the research trials. I can't tell you how much I love this conference. So if you have any other ideas that I've forgotten, haven't dealt with yet, please share them. And thank you.
All right. I was going to summarize a little bit maybe, but I think everybody wants to ask questions. I will say that the metaphor that Julie gave of the Mount Kilimanjaro and feeling like, that was the mountain to climb really resonated with me. I'm a 2-time cancer survivor, and my daughter was diagnosed with myotonic muscular dystrophy after I got over my second cancer. So we felt like we had earned, some good days ahead. And then she was diagnosed. And I think that's probably a really similar experience for a lot of people, that that you are hit with things you aren't really expecting to have happen. And Kim gave a lot of great advice about making sure you have the support through the support networks or through the resources that are available on the website, so that you have accurate information and can jump in with both feet and figure out how to handle things. And then Emily gave us all this great advice about how to think forward to all the potential mountains you may need to climb, and how to, think about being prepared for those so that you're in a good spot.